Hello, Jeff Hunt here. Just want to go over the launch of this new document by the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulator, and it is the spray foam insulation applied to timber slope roofs in dwellings. Now, this is a very, very important document that all surveyors, valuation surveyors and lenders have all been waiting for. This is the analysis of the risks of various types of retrospective spray foamed to sloping roofs. Now, the problem we've all been having is, where is all the information? How do we know what the risks are? What is the significance of the modelling, and how do we assess them? So the protocol asks surveyors to make sure they are fully up to their knowledge on the risks. Well, we haven't really had anything until now, and the most important table on this document arrives on page 7, where we get this summary of risks. And this is very important because they've looked at two basic zones in the United Kingdom. They've looked at open cell and closed cell, and basically two scenarios, one where there is no vapor check and one when there is. Now, this is important because British Standard 5250 has pretty much always said that you have to have a vapor check layer and or a air gap between the underlays and the insulation, and that is pretty much what we all thought, but there have been some variances in that. So the big take home from this one is that one of the big things it has said is that open cell direct to high resistance underfelts with no vapor check is a very high risk. So that's something we can pick out pretty quickly. So what we need now really is to make sure everybody reads this. I will leave a link in the thing below so that you can read it for yourself. There's also an appendix which looks at how all the data was done. I'm going to go over some other take-homes of the research paper, but do please read this. And what we need now is for the lending community to publish their assessment of the risks that they will accept for lending or not. We really need to get on with this now, and it's no good keeping this in-house. Every surveyor needs to know what the response of the lending community is to this, and so we really definitely do need that. It's very important because not everybody does valuation surveys. It's not as though it can just filter through in-house panels. It has to get out to the wider surveying community as well, because we have to advise clients on likely risks and potential threats to lending, and so we need accurate and detailed assessments and clarity, which is something that's been missing all along. So another important page is on page 62, which shows the mould risk. Now, this is something perhaps we've not taken into before, but this has been included in the summary, and again it gives conditions, it gives different scenarios, and very interestingly there's a very significant introduction of the consequence of the ceiling insulation, and it is very, very clear that if you leave the ceiling insulation on, that this messes up the whole modelling process. So don't forget, this document sets out medium risk, low risk and high risk. So low, medium, high. It doesn't say it would never not work. Okay, it's just saying that these are risk scales, and this is pretty much what we need. Another interesting part of the document is on page 76. Just get there to there now for you, and this is a very fairly comprehensive table, because what it's done is they've looked at the variances, and this is the problem with modelling. You know, what is the occupation rate? What assumptions have you made about the ventilation rates inside the roof? So The variances have been looked at, and this table gives you a very, very good overview of some of those scenarios, both in a severe climate, which they've used Newcastle, and a less severe climate, which they've used London. So some very good charts there, very clear. You need to do a bit of the reading behind all this to understand the limitations of the modelling. But here are some of my take-homes. It's very interesting to note that they're basically saying the safest way to put spray foam into roofs is to use the diagrams in BS 5250 2021. Now don't forget, 2021 is the latest version. Don't read the 2011, I think, because there's changes that have been made specifically to this kind of application. So be very careful that you've got the right version. And really another problem is that some of the basic modelling, which you may see on the BBA certificates and keyword certificates, is too basic. And this has been a loophole, really, that the certificates have said, well, do the basic one first, and if it passes that, then that's fine, just carry on with it. But the trouble with that is you can skew that however you like. So the BBA and keyword really need to step up on this. They've allowed this schematic to run through the design process, which basically has said that if you just use the basic model and that's okay, well, that's fine, don't worry about it. And that's pretty much what's been happening. And the problem with that is that the more complicated models are so expensive to run that you just can't possibly use them in small domestic applications. So there's a big problem from the academic community. Really, you need to make sure that you produce stuff that is actually viable, and when documentation is produced and certificates are created, that this viability and practicality is assessed more accurately. Some of the British standards don't line up. One or two guidance notes have been withdrawn as a result of this document because they just simply don't line up, and we're waiting for updated information. And this has been a bit of a problem all the way through this journey when people have been quoting British standards and BBA certificates. If they don't line up and if they don't make sense, there's no real point in having them. So it's very, very clear that if you've still got the insulation on the ceiling, this has a big factor to play in the modelling. So that's a big visual clue for surveyors doing visual inspections. Also, if we're looking at doing things with pack and retrospective designs, then really if you're saying that you're doing it to pack, then it must be a whole building design. It can't just be one single thing. You can't sit down with the client and just explain your foam to people and just explain the benefit of the foam if you think there is one. So we've got to be careful now about how these products are actually delivered. Again, there's very little to be said about how the occupation levels are actually calculated. Even in this document, it's fairly vague. But this is critical, particularly to clients like social housing clients. The occupational rates in social housing is miles away from any of these assumptions, in my view. And this is something that still needs to be developed. The other interesting point is that what it says is that if you do introduce ventilation into the roof space, when open cell or closed cell is put in, you pretty much blow the thermal performance out of the window. So it does really kind of suggest that if you want to reduce the risk, you've got to compromise on the thermal performance. There's a whole lot around that. You have to read around that to understand what all that means. And it also says that all of the elements of the roof have to be included. So some of these models, you simply cut through one section of the roof. So some of these models is just the foam and the tiles. Doesn't include the timbers, and that's why the more complicated models are needed. But also, if you don't include other elements of the roof, for example, gable ends, you're not going to get the same results. So I hope you can see that this document is absolutely key to where we need to go. It sets out very clearly how the models have been created, what scenarios they have looked at. They've looked beyond just the standard modelling, which I think is great because this is a problem we've all been having. And it sets out very, very clearly and very graphically in these tables what the conclusions mean. So get this document, cut out the tables, and use these on your visual inspections. So I hope you've liked that video. If you have liked that, then please like and subscribe, and take a look at my video channel and see if you like any other videos that I've done. I also undertake mentoring online for surveyors doing level 3, and that's available to book through my website.